Welcome to You Mad Huh, the podcast created out of brotherhood and presented with love. We've been on a brief hiatus here for a couple of weeks. We had some things that went down. So it's going to be a little bit different than our previous episodes. When we started this podcast, we just dived straight in, and we really didn't give the viewers any background on who we are, where we come from as people. So we want to take an episode or two here and give the audience some insight into where we come from, who we are as people, what has shaped us as people, and that will to some degree speak to why we think that we can chime in on a lot of these topics that we cover, and why we think we have something to say that might be valuable to others. Now, this podcast started kind of just on a whim. I'm on a chat group with Ken and Quake and Ty and some other people, and then I have another chat group I'm on with Rich and a few other people. And I realized that both groups had something to say. Both groups were very insightful, and I knew that Ken and Rich, being on opposite ends of the spectrum, would be great. Would have some great spirited debates. But that's what kind of started this. The whole podcast, but I knew that our backgrounds and where we come from and who we are as people would help as well. So we want to dive into our backgrounds and just let the people know who we are as people. So we're going to cover, we're going to break this out into a few separate sections here. We're going to start with who we are as a foundation. So who we are, break this out into a few separate sections here. We're going to start with who we are as a foundation. So who we are from birth to graduating high school. And we also want to dive into academics from birth to graduating high school. What was that journey like? We're going to cover our college years, and then also our life after college. So we may get this in one episode. I doubt it. So we'll see where we get with that. But I'm going to kick this off with my foundation and where I come from, and kind of what molded me into who I am. And we're going to have each member go through essentially their life story. So I was born. Again, my name is Paul Fleming. I was born in Raleigh, North Carolina, Rex Hospital. I don't think Rex Hospital is there anymore. But I've lived most of my life in Greensboro. Shortly after I was born, my mother and father divorced. I was about 2 years old when they divorced. My mother had gone to A&T, and she had a degree in home economics, actually. And she got a job in New Bern, North Carolina. My line brother, Torian, will be smiling when I say New Bern. So she worked in New Bern for a while. And remember, she told me a story about a babysitter that was keeping me, and she came and picked me up. And I had fish scales all over me. The lady had been cleaning fish. So she was like, no, we're not putting up with this. So we eventually moved back to Greensboro, and we lived with my grandmother and my grandfather and my uncle for a few years. And then eventually we moved out, got an apartment. But that's where I kind of started becoming aware of things. So one of the first things in my life is that my uncle and my grandfather passed away like 6 months apart. So I was probably 5 or 6, maybe. So that male influence that a lot of people have, in the household wasn't really there.
Was your father around, Pete?
No, he lived in Atlanta. He had moved to Atlanta. Atlanta was, I guess, becoming one of those places to be in the South. We visited maybe once. I think we visited once, and he'd pick me up a couple of summers and take me down to Atlanta. But it wasn't a consistent relationship. And I really didn't understand it until later when he passed away. He was a Vietnam veteran. I didn't know that. And I think that, and part of his upbringing, he had his father was very tough. My grandfather on that side owned a pool hall. A gas station, a pool hall. If you own a pool hall in the 70s.
Had to be tough.
You had to be, wasn't no playing going on. Right. So I think just his upbringing and and just that militant, that Vietnam experience probably affected him a certain way. I actually have a half brother on that side as well, and I think that marriage might have affected him as well. So I never knew some of that stuff until after he died. So I don't have any hard feelings against him. I kind of understand. Sometimes you have to distance yourself from situations for for somebody else to prosper.
How old were you when he died?
Shoot, it was only maybe 6 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, but he had a hard life. He was homeless when he died, when he passed away. So, but that's kind of one of those things. I remember I met him like right after I graduated from A&T, and I went down to see him. And he was like, "Well, you're a man now, and if you want a relationship with me, that's up to you." And as soon as he said that, I was like, "Dog, you should be reaching out to me." Right. So I didn't talk to him for like 25 years. I didn't talk to him. It was on a bus. He's like, "I'm on a bus. I'll call you back." And he seemed kind of a little choked up, but he never called back. That's the last time I talked to him. So, but maybe that's how I can why I don't get so attached to things either. Sometimes, I mean, I have a lot of people that get attached to stuff, and I just don't. But we lived with my grandmother for a long time, for until I was 9, and the community I come from, just to give you an idea of what that was like. So we lived in off of, if you know Greensboro, Groomtown Road, right? So it was a close-knit neighborhood, dirt road at that point in time. So you couldn't wash your car. If you did, it was gonna be dirty. But something I didn't realize later is how prosperous the neighborhood really was, because in high school you go through other neighborhoods. We lived there where Quake lives now, Sedgefield. So your bus goes through Sedgefield, or you go through some other middle class neighborhoods, and you see a little bit bigger houses, and you're like, okay, these people are doing pretty well. But what I didn't realize is that probably everybody in our neighborhood owned the land that they lived on and owned the houses that they lived in. They might have actually built them from the ground up. The house I grew up in, my grandfather built that, and they owned over an acre of land back then. So, I didn't look or know enough to know, how prosperous they were for that time. Considering my grandmother dropped out of high school in the 9th grade so she could help take care of her brothers and sisters, so.
Paul, be sure to tell them how she made the best fried zucchini. Oh my God!
What? I got a hot meal every day. Fresh vegetables out of gardens, all that. So
nice.
The neighborhood I grew up in, you might have people riding down the street or on horses, or we had people that owned cows, right next door. And it wasn't like super rural, but that's what people did. People hunted. My neighbor had probably 50 or 60 hunting dogs. So when I talk about fishing and motorcycles and stuff, that's kind of where I grew up. So even though I'm right on the border of the city of Greensboro, that's kind of how it was for me, growing up. And everybody knew everybody. Everybody was probably related to some degree. But it was
you wasn't getting away with nothing. You wasn't getting away with nothing in that one.
No, Rich knows, because Rich's father and yes, it's from right in that little neighborhood. It's called Red Hill, where Hester Park is. If you know about Hester Park, but it's a close-knit community, and that's how I got into fishing and dirt bikes and all that stuff in my youth. There was a lake not too far away, so but growing up was very for me, when I was younger, was very free. There were some other kids in the neighborhood, and then eventually when you could venture out further, it may be 12 or 13, 14 kids hanging out at certain times. A lot of them were raised by grandparents, in some cases. But that's what's my life. Growing up is very rural, but we were all family, So even to this day, when I'm riding around my neighborhood I live in now, I'm always waving my hand, speaking to people that I don't even know, And I know they look at me sometimes like, what are you waving at me for? You don't know me, but that's how we did, you know. If we didn't knew you or not, hey, how you doing? What's going on?
Right.
You know, that's how I grew up. Now, in terms of a little bit later in life, probably when I was 9 years old. Well, when I was 9 years old, my mother got married again. Now, this probably affected me more negatively than I realized, but this is how this happened. So I've lived with my mother, my grandmother, my whole life, you know. And when like my mother's like, hey, you know, we're going to I'm going to get married today. You know, we're going to get married. I was like, oh, okay. So I had my little suit on. Everybody's there. So I remember it was an older white minister that was doing the ceremony. So after the ceremony, my mom is like, so you're going to live with your grandmother, and I'm going to live with Charles, who's my stepdad. And I'm just like, huh?
Wow.
Like, yeah. She was like, well, you could live with us, but you know, your grandmother's going to be by herself. She kind of got me. She got me on that.
Oh, wow.
But I guess it was, you know, that was her way of doing it. Now, the thing is, she just moved to the other side of town. I saw her probably every other day, and I talked to her probably every day. But at 9 years old, when the person you've been with your whole life essentially moves away.
It's major.
Yeah, at that point forward, I kind of say, I of course, I was well taken care of, right? But I almost felt like I was kind of on my own to a degree, you know. That's kind of how it was. I didn't have anybody to really help me with homework or, you know, hey, let's go read a book or let's go do some math. It's kind of up to me at that point to
figure it out.
Get to wherever exactly. So, but I remember a few days after she called me, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And I remember I was comfortable, but later on in life, when I think about it, I'm like, that was a pretty traumatic thing, you know?
Yeah.
But it turned out to be a positive thing. My stepfather, Charles, he was a great guy. He's a great guy, one of the strongest people I've ever met in my life. And his family accepted me with open arms. And his family was different than my mother's family. They were from Charlottesville, Virginia. They were all about education and academics and that stuff. So he and his brothers, they all did really well in life. One of his brothers became the head of music at Disney, the Disney. So Rich, when I talked to you about George Zimmerman, and I'm like, I know where he lived and what a gated community was. Charles's brother lived in a real gated community in Sanford, but I digress. But either way, and my sister, I have a stepsister. Her name is Charlene Carter, and she was one of the first classes of the School of Science and Math in North Carolina, which is a academically gifted school in Durham, North Carolina. She was in the very first class there. So that gave me some insight into another type of family. The people on my side of the family were more blue collar. And they were a little bit more refined. Like when my stepdad's parents had their 50th wedding anniversary or something, you know, everybody dressed up in tuxedos and they had a big event for them. So it gave me some insight into, you know, a different thing, a different way of life. And he also got me involved with the Shriners. So I was in the drill team with the local Shriners, and that's why I met one of my best friends, Joel Caldwell. And that's how I met a lot of people in Greensboro, as a matter of fact. People I met in the drill team, I ended up seeing at A&T and knowing, you know, all throughout life. But being in that drill team was a big confidence booster. I remember there's a guy named Mr. Jones. And in the drill team, you had to make the cut. So I'm like 9 or 10 years old, and I made the cut to go to this competition. And at the competition, they were like, hey, somebody's got to drop. So I started crying because I thought they meant that I had to drop, right? And Mr. Jones came, he's like, no, we're not talking about you. He was like, no, we just need somebody to drop. And he said, son, you got to have more confidence in yourself. You got to believe in yourself, right? So that's a key moment in my life.
Yeah, you didn't start stepping harder, did you? Did you start stepping harder?
I probably did, because you got to realize I'm 9 or 10. Their guys like 16 and 17, so you got to keep up with them. You got to be sharp. And we actually got a 3rd place in that competition. We weren't even supposed to do that well.
Okay.
So, but that experience and that exposure that I got once when my mom married my stepdad.
Yeah.
It was a pivotal point in my life as well. So, I always had support. I didn't always have people necessarily around. Like my mother wasn't around every day, but she is my biggest supporter. And I learned so much from my stepdad, Charles. He's like I said, one of the strongest people I know. But it did seem like at some point I was kind of on my own. Yeah. So, going through high school and all that. It's I have plenty of friends and all that, but again, I just didn't have that traditional family dynamic. So, but either way, and then high school for me was pretty typical. I went to mostly white high schools, I guess you could say. And when I was in high school, I worked a job 6 days a week, cleaning horse stalls at a local barn. That was my job. But I made more than working at McDonald's, and I loved horses. A lot of people don't know that. I still love horses to this day. But
Paul, can I add something? I don't want to interrupt, but
sure. No, go ahead.
I looked up to him, little that he knows, because back then it was impressive the kind of cash flow he kept on hand. It was legal, and he was the first out of the. You had your fellas that you hung with that went and got his own car. I mean, he paid for his own car, and I'll always be impressed.
When did y'all meet, Rich? How did y'all meet? When? I mean, y'all always been together?
Yeah.
Okay. We're cousins.
Yeah. So,
and y'all grew up around each other ever since you were little?
Pretty much. I mean, I was a military brat, so when my dad finally settled here in Greensboro, they always got us together, and we would pretty much do a little bit of everything: the fishing. We worked a YMCA camp together.
I was going to ask cousins from which family?
My mother's side of the family.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And Rich's dad actually took me to my first football practice. My mom said, "Hey, he needs to get into some guy stuff. I guess you should call it back then was guy stuff." I had no idea about football. I just got in the car and went, and because Rich has some prominent athletes in his family actually, so they knew all about football. I had no idea how many players were on a team, or they just give them the ball and run. That was my thing. But Rich's dad took me to my first football practice. And he was always someone to look up to in the community. Rich's dad was very accomplished. His whole family. So I'm thankful that he treated me as nice as he did throughout his life.
We got to go back to the stables. Paul used to. I don't know. You gave me the feeling that you didn't like the fact that you had the job in the stables. It was kind of like his mother made him. You have to give
6 days a week.
Yeah, you have to get him to tell you what transpired for that to occur. It was about him being, how he was saying he was free. Paul would ride his bike at midnight down High Point Road by himself. He might have been with some other people, but the thing is, I think his mother making him do that, and he was by himself. I mean, not to say that his grandmother, but when you have grandparents, they not up when you they not helping you with the home. They can love you all they want, but the kind of stuff he's sharing. But I think that single-handedly, in my opinion, Paul was on a whole nother level maturity-wise from all of us, because the dude was working.
Yeah.
I mean, he was working. You know how work brings something out of you, right? Yep. I ain't talking about chores in the house. The work he was doing wasn't no joke. There's not a lot of people want to do that kind of work. But anyway, I'm not going to interrupt.
But that's true. But I've been working since I was 12. And Rich is partially right. So one summer when I was probably, 11, me and my friend rode from Vandalia Road, that horse stable, all the way over to Battleground. It was bicycle
Oh
shop.
my God.
And somebody happened to see us, and they told my mom. So after that, my mom was like, "Look, you're gonna do something every summer." So I started having to volunteer and that little paper routes. But Rich is right. She never found out about the late night rides sneaking out the house. She never found out about that. But Rich is right. Rich is right. So, but yeah, my high school life was it. 6 days a week, rain, sleet, snow. It didn't matter. I was working at the stables. But one last thing here about my kind of the community I grew up in my life growing up. I mentioned I liked horses. I had ponies when I was a kid, and this is how I got a pony. So one of our neighbors, his wife used to drive me and my grandmother to church every Sunday. So I just mentioned, or somebody mentioned, my grandmother, I mentioned that I like horses. So one day I came home and somebody had cleared all this land behind our house. The next day I come home and there's some fencing up around this open area. The next day I come home and there's a horse at my house, a pony. We didn't ask for it. We didn't buy it. He just got me a pony. And I was like, what is that? And actually, he got me 2 more ponies after that. So that's the type of neighborhood, the type of people in the neighborhood I lived in for a good part of my life. Now later on, when drugs and some of that hit, that affected us as well. Actually, the house across the street from me was a drug house, but I didn't really know it because all the people going were people I knew. You know, they were older than me, and there was no gunfights. There's no shooting and stabbings, but they just went and they did drugs. You know, my relatives, and that's what it was. So, you know, I guess you don't have to live in a big city for that tough stuff to affect you. But I didn't really realize it at that point because they were just people in the neighborhood, and they were, you know, that was what it was. So that was my life up until high school, up until I graduated high school. So I know that was long. We may have to cut that, but you know, that is what it is. There's so much more, but that gives you a pretty good idea of kind of where I grew up.
Good stuff, brother. Good stuff.
That's good.
So Rich, you want to jump in next, man?
I thought maybe Quake might want to go. You want to go, Quake?
Sure.
It's up to you guys.
Sure.
Go ahead,
Quake. I think Quake was really hitting on some stuff. I'm really intrigued. I want to hear about Quakes.
So I was born in DC, right? Young parents. It was 23 and 25 when I was born. Stayed in DC a few years, and we moved to North Carolina. So I started school in North Carolina, and until we were I was probably 7, and then we went back to DC. And this whole change was my mother migrated from North Carolina to DC in the Great Migration with her parents to find work. And my father's originally from North Carolina, and after high school, he migrated to DC also. So they met from one of my mom's cousins, which grew up across the street from my dad.
And they met here in DC, or they met in
DC.
So where are the Smiths from? They're from down there or up here?
Who's that?
On your mom's side. Where are they from?
My mom's family originally is from North Carolina.
But not Kenansville, not that.
Yeah, my grandfather's family is the Smith family in Kenansville, and my mother's family is the Wiggins family from Warsaw.
Okay.
And so at this point, they're 16 and 18, right? They start dating, and I come along 4 or 5 years later, and you know this is early 70s, so we've got free love and heroin, right? So my dad's crew, he was a civil servant working at the time at the Capitol, and I come along. I'm certain that I was probably an unplanned pregnancy, but they were together. And so they decided they were going to get married and do the family bill. But my dad was young and impressionable, and he developed dependency issues. So part of that moving from DC was to get him out of the city. And that's how we wound up in North Carolina. And being that he's from North Carolina, my grandfather had a farm. And I think at the time he purchased it was about 200 acres.
Wow.
And over the course of time and family, he wound up breaking that down and selling to other family members so that they would have places to stay. So I think overall, at the end of that, we probably wound up with like 50 acres, right? So my parents had a house. We had a house.
You say 50 acres?
Yeah, about 60.
60. Oh, that's big. That's big.
Yeah. So, like you, Paul, I had a lot of freedom as a kid. I had the dirt bikes, the mini bikes, the things. But I also
I thought he was rich.
but you also
had to work, right? So I was the sole male grandchild there, so I had to farm. So I had to plant and corn and soybeans and feed the hogs and chickens and everything, right? But that was cool. I think in retrospect, now that I'm grown, it developed a relationship between my grandfather and I, because it was just us. My parents were working and my aunts and uncles were working, and a lot of that responsibility fell to me. But like you, school-wise, I've always been a middle-of-the-road kid, B student. I've never been a straight A kid. That just wasn't my thing. And I think part of that was the freedom. It wasn't to intellect or capability. I never had anybody to check work. Nobody ever asked me if I did the work. It was just they trusted the fact that I did it. And I think that probably became my downfall along the way, right? I never had anybody to check on that. I played sports. My first love was baseball. I got to middle school and stopped that. And but that's really it. I mean, going into high school, still play sports. I think Ken and all of us had jobs. We didn't come from money, so in order to have some of the flashy things, is what I would call it, had to work. So I had to work for the Air Maxes and the fresh Reeboks and the sweatsuits and the Calvin Klein jeans, and that's where that wound up. So I think part of my development and maturation was friendships, and I don't want to sound repetitive because it's gonna be that story throughout my life, right? Hump and Ken have been there in my life from 12 years old. Well, Hump has been there from day one, and I think we met Ken at 12. And the bond is unbreakable. It's unbreakable. I think we've had this accountability factor. I don't think we've ever spoken of it, but it's always been a level of expectation. And I've appreciated it because these brothers are the kind of brothers that tell you, hey man, you've been out a couple of times this week, but I had to see you study. Right. So we need to get some study time in. And they were a whole lot more disciplined than me. I've always been the social butterfly. So they were more astute and disciplined academically, and they kept me grounded.
But you made us real. You were always the human, right?
Well, I'm the icebreaker, right? I'm the live wire out of the crew. I keep some foolishness, but I also buy into the fact that
that's saying something.
What's that?
That's saying something with that crew.
But Ty, I developed a very special set of skills early on that probably enlightened them to some things that we probably shouldn't have been knowing, right? Or doing. and knowing cues of the opposite sex and what they think and how they felt. And I probably developed that because when I was younger, I was in places I shouldn't have been, seeing and hearing things that prompted me to know what it was, right?
Such as.
Look, man, I get this, and if you've ever met my dad, you know where I got it from, right? This guy is the most social person I've ever met in my life.
Wow.
You can drop him in the desert, and he'll come out with like 30 people, and they're all surrounded by him, entertained by him, and he can get anything he wants from those people.
Wow.
So I developed that. I didn't work at it. I just had it. It was an innate ability to have people to draw to me.
And can I just add that his dad Buster and Quake can say anything. They literally can say anything in any set, and it goes right. It goes, and the charm that Buster has, that Quake. We all know Quake, and we know he has that too. But he got it from his dad, and they are just electric. And if you've ever been around Buster, especially when he was younger, when we were kids, watching him was a TV show to us, right? His entertainment factor was so much, and all of a sudden, and as we came up, Quake had it too. So
and that guy can work a room like none other.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, he would know not a soul, and would come out with tickets to games or invitations for dinner. I mean, just it's unbelievable, right?
Know all the ladies, know all the women in the room, right?
They love him. Yeah. They love him.
And I can confirm that because I've only met your dad a couple of times, Quake maybe twice, but people love you. Quake is. I don't know anybody that said anything bad about Quake, man. People they like you as a person, and I can see that. I'm gonna say it. He can't say it because you won't find better people on the planet than Quake's family. His dad, his mother, him, his sister. They're salt of the earth. I don't know anybody who hates any of them. And never known anybody.
Part of that is for my parents, both sides of my family, it's like one big family. Like you've got aunts and uncles on each side, but they were so young that that's all they knew. So even now, I'm very family oriented. I don't miss much of anything, whether it's family reunions or graduations or anything. Childbirths or christenings, even if I don't get there, I'm always sending and doing and helping in some capacity. And then we matriculate to college. We get the A&T. We're gonna save that. It was like a whole. We're gonna save that. Yeah, that's a whole different section. Good. We'll table that. Yep. All right. So Rich or Kid or Ty, you want to jump in, man?
No, go ahead and let Ken go. So
all right, go ahead, Kid.
Finish this whole,
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like Ray said before, kind of feel like I'm being a little bit vulnerable because I think and I hear this a lot, right? I'm so polished today that people would have no idea that of kind of how I started, because I literally started from the bottom. Now we're here, type of thing, right?
Say it again, Ken.
Yeah, you heard me. I started from the bottom. Now we're here, and I mean, y'all all knew me. I'm the same dude who had a go too. So I grew up big time, but I started going all the way back. I was born in Magnolia, North Carolina, which is about what, Quake, 12 miles from Quake's hometown. In Pender Hospital, which is in Pender County, which was next to ours in Duplin County. In 71, my father was 18 and my mother just turned 16, right? So I was born to two like teenage parents who were out doing things in them days that it just wasn't supposed to be done, right?
Right.
And here they are. Now they got this little big head boy. My mom turned her birthday. Her birthday was Monday. My birthday is next week. So she literally had just turned 16 when I was born, which is relevant because in many ways we've grown up together, and she is, along with my wife, and she's and my daughter. She's my heart, right? But you just wouldn't. A lot of people don't realize that I'm born of kind of teenage parents that way. So they were together. They moved from North Carolina here to the DC area. But then they sent me back to live with my grandmother, and I went to kindergarten in not far from where I was born. Stayed there for a year before coming back here to live with them from first to sixth grade, right? So literally the apartment that we lived in is 15 minutes from where my house is now. Now that's a very different 15 minutes, because if you know the DC, that's inside the Beltway compared to outside the Beltway where I live now. So it's very different. But in them days, it was way more kind of urban, a bit hood, right? And and I learned a ton in those days, because I had this young, I was 7, 8, 9 up to 10. My mother was 25, 26, working, trying to make a living, because she had both of them doing the best they could in the late 70s, early 80s. And me and my sister, who's 2 years younger, and you guys know Tim, who's 5 years younger, we had to step up. We had to step up because they were busy, right? And while we had a tremendous relationship with my mother, my relationship with my father was just wasn't good, and it never was good. It was never. He for the most part, he was quite distant to all three of us, to me, my sister, and my brother. And in many ways, today we kind of feel like it was because so much of his life got disrupted at an early time, right? When I was born, he was 18 and on his way to Fayetteville State, right? And had to drop out of Fayetteville State to all of a sudden start a family. And so, there's so many. P, I love the way you talk about your incidents, and I can go on for hours. And some of these things I probably never spoken. Like Quake, you probably never heard these stories. But we didn't have the best of relationship. But so what it did is it taught me and my sister, and Tim to some extent, that we had to work. We had to do chores around the house. We had to hold it down. And my mother was a young mother with 3 kids by the time she was 26. She didn't fuck around, right? She's like, if I tell you guys got to do it, you better do it. And I'm only going to tell you once. And so, and she made us get our homework done, cook and clean, be outside. We can go outside, but like everybody else, when the lights came on, we had to come back in. And she just didn't mess around with those things, right? And that taught, in many ways, taught me the discipline that is still part of my kind of life today. Before my 11th birthday, though, or before my 12th birthday, they decided to split. And it was a little bit traumatic because they were both splitting and staying here in the DC area. And me, Carla, and T, my siblings, we moved to North Carolina to live with my grandma. And that was at the end of 6th grade for me. And that was really tough because all of a sudden I'm this like PG County little, kind of urban kid now down with these little country kids. These country kids, and they corny and whatnot.
Say, how many names did you call them, kid?
I called them all kinds of names, Pete. They were just corny. These corny little Bamas, right? This I was like, come on.
Right.
And one day, and I was having a hard time. We moved out in April, so in the 6th grade. The next year, 7th grade, I had a hard time finishing school, starting out. And in the 7th grade, I'm sitting in the classroom. And it's me and all the kids knew each other except me and this other kid. My name is Ken Mayer. His name was his initials were also KM, in case he see this and hate the story. Me and him was sitting in the corner, and we both were probably mean mugging and like these little country kids won't even talk to us or something. And this one snickering kid we kept seeing over in the corner, just giggling and sniggling, and all of a sudden, next thing I know, this kid is like right beside me saying, "Hey, what's your name?" It's like, my name is Kenny Merritt. And he turned to the other and said, "What's your name?" He's like, "My name is blah, blah, blah." He says, "My name is Ray Ray." You see that boy over there? You see that? That's Ace. He run fast. Did you run fast? And I was like, "I don't know, man." He said, "Come on, man. Y'all can hang with us." And no bullshit. That changed almost everything for me. Because at that moment, I was this kid who was all about trying to do the best I could as a little kid, with all from a disciplined mom, trying to be disciplined, working, to now being around these little Bama kids in the South, to all of a sudden now having somebody who was my boy, who accepted. And so from that moment, there was Quake. He eventually introduced me to the other kids. They all accepted me, and I kind of got back on track, and my grades went back to where they were when I was in elementary school. And I actually, in the way our school worked, you remember this, Quake, there was 7-3, 7-2, 7-1. They put us in these kind of weird categories. Mm-hmm. And I got moved up to 8-3 because Quake and I were in 7 together, in 2 together, and in 3. It was only 2 black young boys in that class. One of them was Hum, and another one of our boys who we still tight with. Today was his birthday. Me, Hump, and Quake sent him a birthday shot, and so I moved up, and that's when me and Hump became the best of boys in 8th grade, and the rest is history. And as Quake said, it's something that in our own ways we've held each other accountable. We have, in our own way, friendly competed, pulled each other up, but all in love. And I owe so much of kind of the human that I am to my brothers, right? And so, it's because of them that, because I was always probably more focused. The guy y'all see that's always kind of, I'm overly serious. Hump and Quake brought me in. I know more people in A&T. Hump and Quake introduced me, because otherwise socially, I would have been too like focused on school, focused on getting out, because aspirationally, given the way I grew up, I only had goals in my life of, hey, I wasn't going to be poor, right? And I was going to have real independence and be middle class and all that. Those were the things, because we We were so poor. The house I grew up in Quake, you'll remember this. Quake's cousin, who passed away some years ago, was killed. That we loved and missed him dearly. But he came to our house one day and he said, "Hey, Ray, lives in a little green Pizza Hut, right?" And the house was probably about 800, 900 square feet. There was 6 of us in the house, and it was tough. It was tough. It was drafty. We were on. It was my grandmother, my aunt, and 5 kids, right? And so it was not a great experience. And that drove me that I was going to change my world and everyone around me. And without Quake and Hump bringing me to social, my whole being would have been about that shit, and not, I probably wouldn't be nearly as close to all the brothers and everybody we know. I owe a ton to those 2 brothers.
Ken, I got a question.
Yeah.
I was just gonna ask. So those were your siblings that were in the house with you?
It was 3 of us, me, my sister, and my brother, and then my cousin. So at the top was my grandmother and her daughter, and her 2 kids, and then 3 of us who that aunt was my mother's sister. You know what I mean?
So you had a younger aunt. Well, I guess the aunt was closer in age with y'all. No.
Well, actually, she was older. She was older than my mother.
Okay.
Right? But if you think about it, I guess what I'm saying, there was no man in the house. It was 2 women, my grandmother and my aunt. Right. Did all the, who raised us essentially. 5.
But my main question was everybody your age, the children were?
I'm sorry. I was the oldest of the 5. I was the oldest of the kids. Right. Okay. So it was me, my cousin, my sister, my cousin, my brother.
And were all of you as driven as you are to aspire to what you? Okay.
No, I can answer that. I think a lot of that has to do. Ken, if I'm wrong, please chime in. But Ken, hey man, that's one of the most driven people I've ever met in my life.
Wow.
I know TT's got it, and Carla's got it later on, and it was not due to intellect, right? I think it's due to the choice,
right?
And when you factor that, God gives us free will.
Amen.
And Ken has always been, and he's absolutely correct. Nothing was ever going to stop him.
He was adamant
from being successful. Nothing, or nobody for that matter.
There's no animosity with any of the siblings over how you've turned out and the success that you've had.
I think for the most part, my cousin, I don't see him as much as I like, because they're still in that area, Magnolia, and Rich, for better or for worse, and this probably and I take full accountability if people see it for worse. But when I charged to get out, I kind of was getting out and wasn't heading back. So I'm bad about kind of going back to that area and whatnot. If we're being fair, they probably always will say, well, why does he ever come back? I think a lot of our family, and they have every right of that. And that's the kind of stuff I talk about when I say, if it wasn't for certain people in my life, again, Quake and Hump are part of that, my wife and others. I mean, I would just stay focused on getting shit done, right? The softer things in life wouldn't matter as much. And for better or for worse, if there is any of that, and they see this, I apologize to them for that, right? But because for me, it's not. I'm more wired to think about tomorrow being better than I am to think about reminiscing about yesterday, and that's just a flaw probably in my persona.
I don't know that that's a flaw. I was just curious because I know that sometimes the way things play out, it doesn't always. People might see it one way, and they don't know that it's not that you don't love them. It's just a matter of like you said, you're driven, and you know that's, and with Quake saying the different mechanics about how you see things and how you're driven. It's not about not loving them. It's about what you want out of this life, right?
Yeah.
So I was curious about that. That's very interesting.
So I wanted to ask you something about that. So you mentioned that you were just driven, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is for Quake, whoever, you know, everybody on this podcast. Did you have a specific goal in terms of the success that you wanted? Like, did you want to be a doctor? Did you want to be a lawyer? You know, because I didn't have any drive like that. I had no idea what I wanted out of life. I wanted to ride dirt bikes. That was it. You know, I think if I had done that when I was younger more, I might have gotten out of it. But I never really had that type of drive for some reason. It's not like I came from a prominent family or anything like that. But you know, did you have something specific when you were younger that you wanted to become, or did you just know you wanted to be successful?
I would say it's more, I knew I wanted to be successful. I mean, I had somewhat like crumbs of visions around it, but I know we're parsing up the college and all that part of stuff. But when I say I was getting out and going to do better, like real talk, I'm the kind of dude that if I had to, I would have been a drug dealer. Right?
You told me that.
That's no bullshit, right? You know, if I had to be Nino Brown, that's what I would have done, right? To get out.
And see, that's that thin line that people don't realize, is that certain things can push you to one side or the other.
Right.
You know, not that you intentionally would want to hurt anybody, but that success, that drive is so strong. How about you, Quake? Did you have any like a specific what you wanted to be in life when you were younger? Or
I did not.
Just, you know,
I think for me it was, I knew what I didn't want to be.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Right?
There you go.
I can vividly remember the day that I decided I was going to go to college. I'm standing in the middle of a tobacco field, and it's August, and I'm looking around, and if you know anything about tobacco, there's what they call topping and suckering tobacco, right? And I'm looking at the people that are in this field. They're 75, 80-year-old men. And I'm 17, 16. And there was another young guy. There were two more guys with me, and both of them wound up going to college as well. But I knew, I didn't know. See, I think part of the issue for me is I'm a first generation college kid. I didn't have anybody to tell me, or they couldn't tell me what they didn't know, right? And I figured a lot of stuff out on my own, and it wasn't because people gave us a template to follow. It was, there's got to be more to life than this. This is, I can't do this at 75. I don't want to do it at 17.
Right.
Wait, there were a lot of like when we were like, say when we were in junior high and in high school, there just weren't a lot of older guys who had even kind of paid the wave. Hunt was here; he could talk about his brothers who were older and gone, but they didn't go to college. They went off and they were big brothers to us, and we still love them today. Oh, yeah. But we just didn't have a lot of examples in our small town, right? So we kind of figured this shit out together along the way because we didn't have examples.
And that's go ahead.
And in doing so, and I stress this to my own kids currently because they're 17. The younger two are 17 and almost 15, and I find myself at a place being so driven at this point that I need them to make decisions right now, right? Because I didn't have it. I found it by default. So when I'm looking at them, they're doing all the things. They're doing SAT prep. They're applying for scholarships. You know, we're doing the Howard tour tomorrow for Miles, and he's a junior. Dude, we toured colleges alone.
That's right.
Wow.
Our parents don't even know when we went.
Wow.
Yeah, the three of us got in one, probably a car and drove to the colleges. You know,
I think so. Hum said he went to Aggie Fest.
Yeah.
It was he went to Aggie Fest. It was like it's all over. Yeah,
we went to Aggie. That was our junior year of high school. That was our junior year of high school, and that was we were like, okay, we're coming here.
That was it. There wasn't anywhere else we were going.
Right.
And those things I play them
I
back.
thought y'all were going to tell me that you went into different halls and spoke to different professors about what they would.
It was Aggie Fest, brother. That was the selling point.
It was during biker shorts time.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Doing
the butt. And
now, Kid, your perspective is like Sean. Yeah. And I'll probably bleep his name out at the end of this. But I asked Sean about this a long time ago. I was like, did you know you wanted to be? Did you know what you wanted to be when you came to college? And I think I asked him this when we were maybe just out of school, and he said, "No, I just knew I wanted to be successful."
Yeah.
Because he started off in engineering. He said he took a test, that score came back, and he went right over to the business building. Because it didn't matter if he was an engineer or doctor. He just wanted to be successful in life. And I see that in a lot of people. They just want to be successful. They just want to get out of whatever circumstance it is, their town or whatever it might be. So
for young cats watching this, right? Hopefully they take it for what we're saying, right? We like this. None of this was like a game plan that we had. We had to figure it out along the way. So if they're trying to figure it out, you can do it, right? But you do have to surround yourselves with other folks who of like mind, of like heart, like spirit, and workmanship, right? And that's what we had. Like we all found each other, Sean, Torian. Like we all ended up in the same, by the grace of God, connected as freshmen at A&T. And even today we're not all the same, but our value system is the same. Our work, we push one another. We are a rising tide that's lifted all of us as boats. You know what I mean? And so anybody watching, they should learn that because we're a posse, and that kind of pure thing is real.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing in that, gentlemen, is the value, if you can find it, is a mentorship. And sometimes your mentors can be people your same age. I mean, more often than not, it comes from folks that are older than you because they can, like y'all were saying, you didn't really have that. You would have benefited from it. But you guys kind of mentored each other and pushed each other and encouraged each other. It's a beautiful thing. I see what you mean when you say that the bond is unbreakable.
Well, we do it now. I tell young folks that they gotta young men. Let's be real. Young black men, you have to find your crew. Like you can't go through this by yourself. It's too hard.
But when you're choosing that crew, right, make sure that they are striving for the good stuff, because you can have different kinds of crews.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So Rich and Ty, why don't you guys give us your stories?
I'll do mine real quick. I was born in Fort Riley, Kansas. I was the child of I guess at the time he was a captain in the Army. And I had two younger brothers. And on Christmas Day back in 1976, our hometown, which is Greensboro, we were traveling back to visit my grandparents and the rest of the family. And we were hit by a drunk driver. Killed my mother instantly on Christmas Day. So age of 4, no mother. Dad pretty much was all I had. God rest his soul. He died 2023. But we ended up moving in with my grandparents. The military worked it out with my dad that he could be the ROTC instructor over at A&T. He wasn't the lead guy, but he helped out over there. Touched a lot of lives. He got remarried, and we moved to Fort Bragg. I was about 8 then. My story is similar to Paul's in that when we lived with my grandparents, it was just me sleeping in the bed with my dad, right? I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I was 8 when he got remarried, and I had the the shocker of all from that first night when she moved in, that I was pushed out the room and had to go to my room. That thing, as a man now, I get it, but back then, didn't nobody sit me down and say, "Look here now, Daddy needs some time with his wife." But anyway, so
Daddy said he got to do some things.
Absolutely. I totally get it now, but it was like cold turkey on that. Let's see. We lived in Greensboro. Lived in Fort Bragg. He eventually retired, became the ROTC instructor over at Grimsley High. So we moved back to Greensboro. If you heard some of what Paul said, my life was somewhat like that. I liked horses too, but I didn't have the gumption like Paul. Paul and I used to sit down and write down the type of horses we wanted.
Wow.
You remember that, P?
Hey, man.
I wanted a Palomino, and you wanted a quarter horse or something like that. But let's see. When I was young, my hopes and dreams, I always wanted to be rich. And the way I wanted to do it, I wanted to be a professional football player. I always wanted to be a pro football player. Didn't grow much. I was fast at one time, but then I got slow because I got chunky, and I wasn't running no 4.4 or 4.5, and at my size. So I don't know. I guess I can talk a little bit about living there with my grandfather and my dad. It was like I had two dads. So that was special for me. Spent a lot of time under my grandfather. Grew to have a penchant for cigars every now and then because he would be the one giving me my baths, and he would leave the cigar on the tub. Little did he know if he got a call, I was in there. Let's see. Worked a lot of food service jobs in high school. Really didn't ever have a plan B. Like, being, my dad was a retired lieutenant colonel, so there was no option. You're going to college. That's just the mentality. You're going to college. But truth be told, I probably would have done better to go and get a trade and try to start a business like plumbing or something, welding, whatever, something with my hands. Not that I'm all that handy, but I think I'd do better than some of the complicated stuff that I've tried to do. And we're supposed to go into college, right? We're supposed to talk about college. Academics were always okay, but they were never like stellar. I got one.
You ever see what plumbers do sometimes?
Well, I know it's no joke, but I don't want to.
Don't minimize
away from a plumber,
right?
If I'm coming across that I'm taking away from any plumbers,
I'm just saying when you got to go under a house and it might be some.
Oh, okay, you talking about that? Yeah.
I've seen that before. Good money for it, but
I've never been afraid of getting a little dirty. But I get what you're saying. I thought you were talking about like some of the complicated stuff that they might be calculating and whatnot. But
maybe. But
I don't want to take away from that. Yeah, that can be nasty. I wouldn't necessarily say plumber. That's why I was going to throw out a couple other like HVAC or whatever. But
that ain't
clean either. I know.
Yeah, no, I think what you're saying, Richard, like you were influenced to go to college, right? And you're saying something else, not college, would have served you just as well. Like, was military ever following?
Oh well, I mean, there was a lot of pressure, a lot
Yeah.
of unnecessary pressure. Like my aunt who passed just this last year, was it in December, January? No, I mean, no, not January. Maybe it was in November. I can't remember when she passed, but it was recent.
Mm-hmm.
She was my guidance counselor in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So she would always, baby, I know it'll be good. You ought to go into and those first 2 years I took RTC. I ain't want to do that either. I mean, I was around military all the time. Like I joked y'all in that one episode, my dad had us like soldiers up in that house, like for real. I mean, I know it ain't the same.
Yeah, it turned you off.
I think when you're too close to something, you don't necessarily realize that might have been the right route too.
Okay.
That might have. I can't wait to tell y'all about my college experience where I really think what I should be doing, but that's a whole nother talk. But I just want to make sure I cover everything that I got down. My main reason of wanting to play pro ball was I knew that the pay was good, and that I could potentially become rich. I always wanted to be rich so that I could be philanthropic and charitable.
Yeah.
I always wanted to do things for the community and whatnot. But I'm gonna stop now because I'm about to give a little spank to a dog. Y'all,
Well, at least you got the name, Rich.
What's that?
At least you got the name, Rich.
Rich.
Yeah, that's about all I got. I'll be right back.
All right. So Tom, why don't you give us your story, man?
Man, yeah, I got such great stories with a lot of. Mine's kind of boring, I guess. But I was raised in Saginaw, Michigan. My mother's from Itabena, Mississippi, which is the home of Mississippi Valley State University. She's the youngest of 12.
Mm.
My dad is born in Brownsville, Tennessee, and he's the oldest of 9.
Wow.
So I have a huge family that's ridiculously tight.
And they migrated, Ty? Were they like great migration from the South to?
So this
Well,
is the
no,
industrial.
I think a lot of the reason is listening to you guys is the reason they left. I mean, because both were farmers, family, so they worked the fields. We used to go down in the summer, and so. But the big thing with General Motors, Ford, Chrysler. So part of that great migration, my uncle came up, so my father came up. A couple of weeks after he graduated high school. They went right into the plant. Soon as he finished, his brother's 2 years younger, he finished right behind him. So every last one of his brothers worked for General Motors.
Yeah.
That's what they did.
Yes.
My mother, her older sister, like the one that's 2 years older than her, moved to Saginaw. She was working. She's a nurse. Mom came to visit her for the summer. That's how she met my dad from church. She went back, finished school, and then as soon as she finished, she came back and they got married. So honestly, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say I had a great childhood. I can't sit here and get one. I can't. I mean, I'm the youngest of 3. Well, I have a twin sister. And there's pros and cons to that. I think some of that, you need a little bit of that struggle sometimes to kind of, for being the youngest and having that. Sometimes I think about, again, like you said, that you know what I mean? And I worry about that even with my kids, because almost the better their life is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sometimes without that struggle, it can kind of lead to a little bit of complacency too.
Right.
But I was an AB student. I mean, like I said, we lived in Bridgeport, which I was the which at the time, if you know the suburbs of Saginaw, so we used to get teased all the time. We moved, my dad left Saginaw once the city once they got married. Cause when he moved there, like I said, he lived there almost like a frat house. So when he moved there, so the first house he bought that we still have, um, his brother and his two first cousins all came from Brownsville, and they lived together in that house. And then once they got married, of course, they had to get out. But that's when we moved to, but 2 years later, we moved to Bridgeport. And he wanted to live in the suburbs. And so in our neighborhood, we were the second blacks out of probably 65 homes in that subdivision. So everybody thought, again, our parents worked at the same place. But the fact, that's why I laugh to this day. Like we had something, but they worked in the same place. You know what I mean? It's just that he left, Saginaw to go to Bridgeport.
Right.
But it was cool. I was only, sports. I was the only black on my baseball team. But again, we spent a lot of time. Church was the mainstay. My dad, he didn't miss church. I don't care what you did. It was every Sunday. Even once you got older, you can go. I had a girlfriend that was a 7-day Adventist, and I would go to church with her on Saturday. He said that has nothing to do with Sunday. Nothing.
That's right.
So you want to go with her and hang out all day, you get up the next day. So and so that was just, we had freedom that way, but it was, you were going to church on Sunday.
Yeah.
We had one of the tightest families I know. Like people get confused, and I feel sorry for my kids. And we talked about it at funerals. You won't know the difference between my mother's side and my dad's side.
Right.
We have, family who married both sides. Depending on what reunion we're at, I'll call some of my family my cousins, and then at the other reunion, they'll be my uncle and aunt. How tight they are. And I'll tell you, my kids were at least 13, 14 before they knew what side one was on, because they would go. And I always loved it because my parents were kind of the reason for that tightness. You go to church, we all go to the same church, but it was always cool to me that they were the anchor for that, because we have a reunion every year, similar to Ken. This will be our 58th reunion this year. And so that was our vacation. Every year we were going home to see our grand. It wasn't Disney. I always tease my kids. I'm like, look, your first time at Disney was my first time at Disney. I was just as fascinated as they were, because what we did, we were going home to Tennessee to help out there, spend a week at that grandmother's house in Tennessee. Then from there to Mississippi, because my mother about 3 hours from my dad. So we did a week at one and a week at the other. That was our 2-week vacation. But I love it because that's why we're so tight. Our first and second cousins. And even at home, having so many living in Saginaw, my mother being scared. We moved to the suburbs, but we were staying in Saginaw with my aunt until my dad got off work. Then she would go to the house. You know what I mean? So we were the cousins all day in the city, but she wasn't staying there. So it was just funny how, you want to get there, but that's where we were, So, but like I said, I'm one of three. Have an older brother, and have a twin sister, and so almost second generation college. My mother went to college. She was at Mississippi Valley State. She was a teacher for 40 years. Same as my father. He just passed away last year, but they were married 50, 70 years.
Wow.
Up until he passed. So,
wow.
So you live. Go ahead.
You've lived the all American life, Ty.
That's true.
I'm not gonna say that, but it was.
Got a silver spoon over there, bro.
No. It is all American Black people's story, though. It really is, right?
Because again, the other side of that, like you said, you living out there, so you got the racism. You know what I mean? Right. So to your point, you live in maybe the Black, like you say, but it's but the other side of that is, you dealt with that when it came down to sports and getting a fair shot and just, which is the reason I went to HBCU. We're not going to get into college yet, but my mother was the one. She said, "Look, I think y'all need to go." She made me and my sister go to HBCU. Said, "I
Great
don't
to
think
see.
y'all really get it." And that was her. She said, "Look, because you're sitting here, but like she always said, at least growing up in the country, you know where it was. Up in the north,
You going in and out on us.
You're fading out a little bit, Tom.
yeah, I think it's because my
So is I was wondering, because is that why you don't you live in the let's see if you get back, you were living the high life. You don't really listen to rap music. People don't know that. Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh no, I was about lost. I was R&B all day long. You ask anybody.
That's what.
All day.
Ty
Oh,
is the one person I know that's like, I don't really mess with that rap music, boy.
Yeah,
I don't really mess with that.
wrong. I enjoy it and what comes with it, but no, I'm
Right.
not. I'm nowhere near the level of what you guys do.
Well, he grew up in Motown. He grew up in Motown.
I mean,
Good point. Good
that's
point.
his roots.
Yeah, I'm R&B cat. That's it. I'll listen all day long. Even now, I'll work out R&B. So that's just me.
I said I'll elaborate. I mean, I don't think we as Black people fully process generationally kind of like the real deep stories like Ty's family, right? But if you go to the African American Museum of History and Culture here in DC, it talks a whole hell of a lot about the Great Migration, right? Of how so many of our people moved from the South, the Tennessees and the Mississippis, up north. And so for us in the Carolinas, like Quake's family, like my family, from Carolina to DC, and from like the more further west, from up till like Detroit area for auto jobs. And that created those migrations. The federal government here in DC and the auto industry basically created a whole Black middle class.
Yeah,
That's exactly.
That's a real thing. So Ty, your story is actually as rich part of our history as those of us who've had like the father issues that say me and P have had, right?
And I agree with that. And that's why I said it's just amazing when you sit here and again, because most of the people, when you go to my church at home,
pull your mic up a little bit, Ty.
Yeah, like when you go to my church here at home, nobody's from here.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that's the reason they came here, because it was those jobs. But again, like you said, you're dealing with the racism. You know what I mean? Because Henry Ford's story is there for you. They wanted you as a worker, but still you weren't in those areas. So but think about what they had to go through acclimating from the South.
Yep.
Coming here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so sometimes you have to hold, my uncle just passed away. And my father passed away a year ago. His brother was the one next to him, passed away a year and a week after he did. And so at the funeral, they were just telling the story how he was in the South, and he just wouldn't conform to he's the rebel. My Uncle Albert was the rebel. And it just is amazing how you hear stories, and when you hear the brothers and sisters like we're talking. So to hear my aunts talking about him and how, at the restaurant, even back then you had the cow tied to, it wasn't just the white man down there or the older. Right. It was their kids too. So you said you go to a restaurant and they were in front of you, you had to give them the parking space. And so, he said the reason, and it had us laughing, because at the funeral she said, "Look, my grandfather said, you got to get out of here. You're not going to," because he wasn't, because she was just telling some of the stories about him just rebelling. And I'm going to go park in the white spot. I'm going in and just, their story. They're in the car with him, and the white folks coming in just shaking his car because he was in their spot and he wasn't budging. And so, my grandfather was like, you have to go. No, you got to get out of here. You're not going to make it here. And so just to hear that, Did you come here? So just think about the change they had to go through,
Right.
Leaving, home, but it was, but you do it for your family,
Yeah.
So,
Right. Right.
and so, but like I said, my college, and that's why my mother said, she said, I'd rather know where it is than to, have it hidden like it is a lot of times in the north. Just like going to North Carolina. I remember A&T going to orientation. They would tell you, this side of town this side of town that. I
Right.
mean, the stories we would get going to Mississippi to visit my mother. Hearing about my uncle who got stopped, and you go from, or friends of theirs who come back from the north. The downside of that, we always had a nice car. Dad, they worked for General Motors.
Right.
He got a
Right.
new car every 2 years. So you come, but he was so generous. But you come back south. I mean, people in the south, they hating on you. You know what I mean?
Right.
The police.
That's right.
So they would get stopped before you know it. They're in jail for a month. You know what I mean? The
Yeah.
stories you would hear, it just get pulled over for nothing. And so, even coming home was a struggle, for a lot of them. And so it's just amazing, just the stuff that you look back on now. That I just understand why, you just hear them talking at the kitchen table on a
Right.
Saturday. Well, I can't believe you got trying to get money together to get them bailed out. Just crazy stuff, man. You know that they had to fight for to give all of us, the opportunity. So it's just one of those where, but I can't complain. Like I said, I've had a good life.
They 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 would actually hold him in jail for a month.
I mean, because you had to, because until it went to court. I mean, well, no, come on now. Even now you get cases. So imagine, we're talking 30, 40 years ago, because I was a teenager. So yeah, 40 plus years ago. I mean, they don't have to give you a good reason,
Right.
And
And Rich,
slow to go through the system. Yeah.
I was gonna say you got to realize, remember as well, Rich. Remember the, we were coming up the massacre in Greensboro, right? The Klansmen that shot up killed the people
Over
at
at the
the
Grove.
yeah, we were kind of living in that. I mentioned that I lived in the country, or in the a rural area, probably about 150 yards from where I lived. The story was always that this family was the Grand Wizard of the KKK lived there.
Wow.
Those kids rode my bus, right? And I kind of believe it because I clearly remember this little girl. Like, this was we were in high school. She was laughing and talking with us, and when we got to her house, she clammed up like she was nervous as I don't know what,
Yeah.
Wow.
right? And I told Rich about this. Maybe I didn't tell Rich about this, but those types of things happen in the South, and people don't understand how that impacts you. Because you're supposed to be in a transition point where things are equal and people have opportunity, but then you still have that. I remember people stopping on the road and yelling stuff at me when I was a little kid. So like violent stuff. You know what I mean? So yeah, I understand why people would move up north where they were, there was less of that. And people discount that because supposedly things had changed, but we weren't really far removed from that. At least my experience wasn't.
Not even in 2025.
Not even 2025. So that's why when this stuff is happening now, I'm not at all surprised that a lot of people act and feel like they do personally.
Right.
But that is
There will
which is
always be ignorant, sinful people in the world. Always.
oh, you can't get around that. You can't get around that.
I mean, I don't care where you go. There's always going to be ignorant, sinful people, and that's why I always claim we need a revival. We need a shaking. We need a soul shaking revival. But I failed to share with you guys. I had siblings. I've got two older brothers from the first marriage. One lives in New York. Brilliant. He does voiceovers. He's won all kinds of accolades for his voiceover. He does a lot of books, recorded books. He skipped the fourth grade. I used to ask him for help with my fourth grade homework. He couldn't help me because he never did it. And then he went on to Duke. He went to school at Duke. And then I have another brother that was older than him that went to Carolina. He lives in LA. And then he does marketing around the country. He's the alpha, and y'all don't hold that against him. And from my
and and don't skip that he's in entertainment, Rich. He's an entertainment guy. So.
Well, he used to be like, now it's more marketing stuff. Like I worked with him a couple days ago where he was in charge of presenting the was it U.S. Army National Guard. They had like this marketing program that they take to all the high schools. So I stepped in and helped him a little bit. And then out of the second marriage, I have a little sister and a little brother. I don't know if you can call them little anymore. She recently was married, has a daughter. And then the younger brother went to West Point, graduated. He now is in sales out in
Chicago, right?
Seattle. He's in Seattle.
Seattle? Okay.
Yeah, I got two younger siblings too, Rich. Thanks for doing that, because I don't want them to see this and say, well, what about us? My mother remarried, and so I've got I don't know how old they are, but they like 15, 16 years younger than me. A brother.
I failed to acknowledge my sister, and I hope she doesn't see this, because I'm gonna have a hard time, right? But Monica is 7 years younger, very successful young lady, doing her thing with IBM and HR. And I have a half brother from my dad's first marriage as well. So he's 3 years older than me.
Okay. And as I mentioned, I've got a stepsister and a half brother. I've only met my half brother maybe twice in my life. I don't even know where he is at this point. And my sister is actually you guys might know Eric Gladney. He's my brother-in-law. Yeah. Yep, kid, I know you know. I think you know him, right?
I didn't know that.
Yes, my brother-in-law.
Wow.
And they're both actually. I think Eric's a pastor, but my stepsister's I guess a ordained minister. I guess is what it is. But I guess I'm the hoodlum of the family.
No.
I'm definitely not as rough as they are. But
Paul would love that title, but he ain't no hoodlum.
I'm not a hoodlum, but here's the thing though. People don't realize.
You'll
I guess we'll talk about this. We'll talk about this.
Bust the cap with them.
Well, we'll talk about this in the academic portion. I was in class with a lot of kids that ended up being hoodlums when I started school. So I've got a pretty wide view of that side of things too. So I'm lucky that I didn't end up on that path. Right. Just like Ken, because I asked Ken about being a drug dealer or being successful. He told me that. He was like, if I'd gone back to Maryland, I could probably end up being a drug dealer.
I could see that. I could have done the same thing, right? I think I got enough edge that I could do anything, right? It takes discipline to do the right thing.
Yep.
Right. And you have to remain centered to do what's right and what's best. Like, we've got friends that did all the wrong things, and their lives have turned out the way they turned out. But for me, I gotta have peace, man. I gotta have peace where I live, peace where my kids live, where we work. I mean, my wife works in the neighborhood. Look, some things you just have to put in perspective, right? And you just stay grounded by those things. And I go back to, I have praying grandmothers, man, that I could still, even yesterday, I was talking to my sister about how good it would be for us to have discussions and see that they're actually proud of who we became.
Amen.
When you talk about, I think with all the stories, everybody's come from humble beginnings and backgrounds.
Yeah.
and to know that these prayers have come to fruition, and we're reaping the fruits of those prayers, and all the benefits that they put in to make us successful. It's not. I am a firm believer. It's not just by our actions, right? There are plenty of prayers that have been sent long ago, way before probably we were conceived, right? And we're living it.
Amen.
We get to live it.
Yep.
That's incredible.
Yeah, you have to be thankful, because I know I've been out of a lot of situations, and only the grace of God got me out of them.
Absolutely.
So
So
I can't triple that.
So it's really our turn to pray those prayers for those who are coming behind us, right?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, every day, man, every day.
Yeah.
Well, look, I don't think we're going to get to everything else tonight, so I think we're going to wrap it up with our closing individual thoughts here, our little 2-minute thoughts. I think we're going to save the college and after college for the next session. Hopefully Hump will be able to join us on that. Give us some great insight. But Ken, why don't you jump in with your last 2 minutes here?
So my last comments here is, like, April is sports holiday, right? It's like if you're a sports fan, like, this is your time of year, right? I always say it's April and October, but I know, Ty, you love baseball, right? Baseball's starting up, and whether it's the Dodgers or what the Yankees gonna do, what your Tigers are doing, torpedo bats, all kinds of stories start, right? NHL, you got my man Ovi here in DC breaking the record.
Breaking records.
That was great. You just had March Madness, both UConn and then was it Florida? So that was great. March Madness. You got the NFL draft in 2 weeks, and like the capstone is you got the NBA. Wait, before the NBA, you got Stephen A versus LeBron, right? You got to put that in there. But the biggest thing is you got NBA playoffs, right? So it's funny. I won't get any sleep for the next 2 months. You either, Ty, because me and you will be texting at 12:15 when these West Coast games are heading down to the last couple minutes. And so I'm super excited. April always get me jazzed because of the sports calendar, and I'm looking forward to it. April is a sports holiday.
Right. Who's your dark horse to win the NBA?
I guess if I had to pick a team today, I say Boston repeats, but I say that with 35% confidence.
Right.
It's wide open.
Smart.
I thought LKC was it.
I'd say they're next, but would you be surprised if the Lakers beat them? No, right? So
right.
It's gonna be a lot of fun, though.
Gotcha. So, Quake?
I'm excited about my son and this process of where he is right now with entertaining college, right? I didn't get a chance to do that with my family, but I'm in the moment with watching him grow and prepare and develop what his future is going to be, right? My wife and we're ecstatic, man. These kids have so much going for them, and to watch it unfold, man, is beautiful. And it's not just my kids either, right? Like, we followed the journey for Ken and his kids while they were in college, and Paul, your son, and Ty's boys right now. It's beautiful to watch these kids grow and develop, man. I think it's absolutely awesome.
Yep. Mm-hmm. It's a journey.
What a blessing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Rich, you want to jump next?
Yeah. Not to go political, but if you're paying attention, there is a lot of things being done in the crypto space. Crypto is not going anywhere. So I will leave you all with one coin that I think if you were to just hedge your bets, put a little change on it, you'll be happy that you did. I can tell you that in 2014, don't quote me, but I remember seeing Bitcoin when it was at 8 cents and trying to get it. And it just was not an easy thing to acquire back then. There weren't, that was me in my wanting to be rich case. I was also trying to figure out these rental properties that I had. I was working 2 jobs. I stopped trying. And in the midst of stop trying, I could remember not saying it verbally, but saying it to myself, it ain't going to be worth nothing. And I sat there and watched that thing. And the thing about it, if I got it at 8 cents for $100, I probably would have had a whole bunch and sold it all at $100. But I'd have still been in it, paying attention and buying gradually. That's if I'd have known how to do it back then. But anyway, every time it went to a new level, I was like, So I've heard people say Bitcoin, the symbol for it is BTC. The true they say the true name of it is beta test coin. The coin that's going to replace it as the world's coin that all exchanges are going to use is XRP. You might have heard it. You might not have heard it. But you throw a little change on it. I'm here to tell you, you're going to be happy that you did. And I really don't think it'll take long before we see some explosive growth. So that's what I'll leave you with.
All right, Tom?
Yeah, I would say this, based on the insider information we've seen the last few days. I'm going to pick you up on that, Rich.
Hey, hold on. He's calling right now.
I think he might have a source.
Oh, man.
But this was a great conversation, and even for us to have done this 7-8 weeks, and just I've known Quake and Paul, Ken for a long time now, and I've learned a lot tonight, and so that was helpful. Rich, it definitely helped me look at you in a little bit of different light until we get back to the real conversation.
Well, I'll enjoy the short moment of love.
I can't wait to tackle this crypto conversation.
Oh yeah, I got it sitting right here. And then just seeing Ken go from 4 to 12 TVs in the basement. The playoffs coming, or maybe he'll go out to the range and watch it out there. So it's just amazing.
Oh man,
where he's come from. But
I got to get to that man cave. That sounds fun.
You need to. But
it might be 12 zeros in their bank account.
So we have been blessed. I will say that the big thing is those praying grandmothers and just and think about the people before us.
Amen.
So that's
Absolutely.
what that you can't lose sight of.
That's
so,
right.
We know who's in charge no matter what. And at the end of the day, it takes a village. It takes, again, I love the way we do this because I think for so long, men just didn't talk like this.
That's right.
You may have your barbershop conversation, but even those only went to certain levels because most times strangers. But you need that mentorship and that brotherhood to just get through. Just because life is going to throw things at you, but that's just the way life is.
Absolutely.
But now we're throwing at you is how you deal with it, and so having the resource to kind of bend the ear, like you said, Ken, think about you, 12 years old, thinking you were the man. Quake crazy ass came over there and reached out to you. So imagine, but it changed your life, like you said. So imagine the lives we can change. Like Rich said, he wanted to help others and give back. And you don't have to be rich to give back. But there's nothing wrong with it. I love that philanthropy, but I'm just saying, in this day and age, There's so many kids who don't have fathers.
That's right.
You know, who, I mean, look at the excitement Quake has. You know what I mean? So imagine, you know, and that's why through the fraternities and different groups, you can touch folks who don't have that because, you know, men and women, girls and boys, more or less.
That's right.
They need that. They need a man in their life. I mean, you never know just what one conversation can do. And I think we found out tonight what one conversation can do. What, you know, I look at the exposure Paul said from his mother's second marriage, and and until you see things like that, a lot of people don't believe it's real. So it's up to us to kind of show it to them so they know, you know, it's not just on TV. It can happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a testimony right here. So,
Amen.
Yeah, for sure. So hopefully I can make it through this one without shedding a couple of tears. But you know, part of the reason that we went on hiatus was I had a little issue. I had to have a surgery, like emergency surgery. It wasn't a major surgery. It was I had an appendicitis, so I had to remove my appendix. Right. So I'd never had a surgery, so it was, you know, kind of a big deal for me. But you know, the day I came home, I got news that my cousin, who's only 59 years old, had a stroke, and he died from that.
Wow. Sorry.
And you know, I want everybody to just live your life, live every day like it's your last day.
Yeah.
Because it very well could be.
Yep.
The day before he had his stroke, he was helping my brother-in-law, Eric, move. They were laughing and joking, and he went home. He had a stroke and he died. So, you know, live every day like it's your last. Doesn't matter if you're 59 or 54 or if you are 17. You only have a certain amount of days on the planet. You know, let your people know that you appreciate them and that you love them. But don't let a day go by without living that day. Okay.
Absolutely.
So that's
good
my
word.
parting shot. That's my parting shot.
That's a good word.
And we were praying for you as you know, we know that came up on you quick. We were praying, brother. We're delighted that you bounced back so quick. We'd be remiss if we didn't say that. We appreciate you, love you. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
You're back to the P.
Dog, before the surgery, I was talking to Kim. I was like, look, if I don't make it through, this is what I want to be buried in. I want this suit. Because I'd never been under. I was like, you know, you can go under, you might not, you might not make it out. So
but
I was like, this.
Honestly, though, we can't take that for granted, and that's a conversation. All that needs to be in place already.
Exactly.
Because you're going through and you're trying to have those conversations, and I could just lose your mind. I mean, those are important to have that stuff in place. My father, I didn't know till then that he had paid for his plot, my mother's plot. All that was already done. So having that kind of stress, I mean, think about it. And today's prices, hopefully we got another 30 years. But today's prices are a lot better than tomorrow.
Amen.
Ask Dak Prescott. You know, so I'm telling you, we need to do that. That stuff needs to be done.
That's right.
And I was thinking the whole time. I was like, well, I got life insurance, so my kids, my wife, they'll be good. But it was a serious thing. And one more thing I want to mention. My cousin, his name was Kevin Watkins. And I'll put a picture up of him on this on the edit. But he did have a stroke, but they found out he actually had leukemia. Was really kind of what brought everything, to bear. But he had been to the doctor. He had, he had a CAT scan recently. It was going back, but something I got out of that is that sometimes it's your time. It's your time, man.
Yeah,
you can't. When it's your time, it's your time. Some people don't really buy into that, but I've just seen enough crazy stuff happen in life that, you know, when it's your time, it's your time. You can't really run from it. So get the most out of life you can.
Amen.
You know, while you can, and be prepared. You know, make sure your family's in a good spot. But
I
I
can't.
think this is.
I'm sorry.
Say again, Ken. Go ahead.
I can't let you say leukemia and family without shout out to my brother Tim. You guys know I got a text from him last night.
How's he doing, man?
He's still working through it day by day.
All right.
Yeah, we were just as we do from time to time, you know, sports, right? He was that's you know, speaking for him, that's his kind of happy place these days, to be talking sports. Like, you guys know how passionate he is about all kinds of stuff. Richard, you think I get amped? You should know my younger brother.
Wow.
That is the truth.
So we continue to pray
for you, Tim. Love you, brother.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Prayers up.
Well, that'll I guess that'll wrap it up for the night, fellas. I'm looking forward to this next session or next episode. I call them sessions, but episode. We're going to cover that college life and after college life. I think it's going to be very interesting and hopefully very enlightening for some people.
Stop looking, listen. Enjoy the vibe.
Coming next week.
My people.
It's been a pleasure. We'll talk to you all a little bit later.
Or take a sip.
All right.
Gentlemen.
Good. Have a good one, fellas.
I hope you feel it deep in your bones. What you been missing? A mellow tone. Not from the city or from your hood. I got you smiling.